I grew up in the country, and one of our favorite insults to say about someone was that that person was too big for his britches. She was too big for her britches. And what that meant was that person had forgotten where they came from. They'd forgotten what their parents actually did for a living. They forgot how they had to struggle to get somewhere in life. They'd forgotten how much help they'd gotten along the way. And God was kind of concerned that the Jewish people, once he brought them out of Egypt into the promised land, that they would get too big for their britches. That they would forget that he'd done most of the work and they had actually been slaves without any power. And in Deuteronomy 6:21, this is one of the many times throughout the Old Testament that God reminds the people that they shouldn't be getting too big for their britches. What he says is, tell him, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. We were just slaves and then God. But here's the thing. I've known plenty of Christians who've gotten too big for their britches. Matter of fact, there's probably been a few times in my life where I've been a little big for my britches, where I've forgotten where I came from, where I've forgotten how much God's done in my life, how unlikely a candidate I was for God to do anything through me. Most people who become pastors will tell you about the journey and how there's people along the way who start encouraging and saying, hey, you ever thought about being a minister? You thought about being a speaker? You ever thought about... Nobody ever did any of that for Steve. Because nobody ever thought there was any chance Steve was going to be a pastor. But God. I've got failures, I've got mistakes, I've got all these things in my life. You've got failures, you've got mistakes in your life. We've got all these things that need to keep us reminded that we were slaves to sin, that we were hopeless and helpless without God, and then God came into our lives and God rescued us. So, remind yourself regularly. One of the biggest sins a Christian can commit is the same sin that a country person can commit. Never get too big for your britches. And that's today's Jumpstart.